Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Stuart Points, and I am one of CERi's co-directors, the Community Engaged Research Initiative at Simon Fraser University. And it's a real pleasure to welcome you all to our opening talk in the Child and Youth Participatory Research Network. We're going to say a little bit more about the network and its development in a few minutes. But before we begin and get underway with today's session, I want to start off with a territorial acknowledgement, which is a central part, a core feature of CERi's work and our engagement with a host of communities. Simon Fraser's Community Engaged Research Network and the servers that we are drawing on today respectfully and with gratitude work on the shared traditional Coast Salish lands of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Coquitlam nations in Vancouver and Burnaby, respectfully. Also on the Katsi, Kwantlen, Coquitlam, Kaiket, Musqueam, numerous Stolo nations, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen nations in CERi. We acknowledge the sovereignty and equality of Indigenous nations and are guided by aspirations to remake Canada into a decolonial state, comprised of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people who function with respect for one another. With this acknowledgement, we seek to deepen our responsibility and respect for one another, the land, and the culture of this place. As we spend time together today, you're going to meet a number of people who are involved in the network, but somebody who's in our audience, and I want to acknowledge, is Brenda Morrison, who's been a crucial part of this development. It's now a pleasure for me to introduce Laura Wright, who's a postdoc working with us in the area and has been absolutely crucial to our work with the Child and Youth Participatory Research Network. Laura, if I can ask you to turn on your camera and welcome you into the space.
Great, thank you very much, Stuart, and welcome everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you all here. We're pleased to have this as one of the first of the webinars for the webinar series for the Child and Youth Participatory Research Network that Stuart mentioned. The Child and Youth Participatory Research Network has come together as a space to foster dialogue around key issues around participatory research, critical reflection, and move forward action together. It's in its early formation as a space within Western Canada. We're really hoping people who are working in this area, across Western Canada, but also across the globe, can come together more in these conversations. So others are interested in the future in sharing their work or engaging in dialogue, please do let us know, and we'll leave our contact information as well. Today, we're really pleased to have our first session as focusing on Tell Us What We Can Do, Redefining Youth-Adult Research Collaborations. You will see that we'll be focusing on welcome, our community agreements and agenda, an opening discussion with our guest speakers, and then having space for audience reflection, question, and discussion. It's really a chance to explore challenges and opportunities in youth-adult research partnerships. So I'll move to the next slide to speak a little bit about the community agreement. So you can see here the community agreement, and that we are gathering in spirit of mutual support and respect for one another. We are keen to listen and learn from one another, and we are leaving our assumptions at the door. As you can see throughout, and I won't read it all in detail, but just to highlight, we don't use pronouns or assume pronouns, I should say, and we also are ensuring zero tolerance of violence and creating a respectful, inclusive space for dialogue. Questions in the Q&A will feature, will be tracked throughout the presentation, and we'll pose these to our wonderful panelists. If we don't have time to answer some questions, we'll try to follow up afterwards, but we hope that you understand if the dialogue is quite rich and generative. The session is being recorded, as Stuart mentioned, so others can attend or watch it later on who were unable to attend. If you have any tech issues throughout, you can see in the names, there's a wonderful tech team as part of CERi who can be able to answer your questions and provide support. So to get us to have a chance to know a little bit who's here, we're going to pop up a couple poll questions. Okay. So the first question is, where are you calling in from today? And you can click on one of the 4 answers. Give everyone just another 10 seconds so you haven't had a chance to answer yet. Great, so Laura B, I think we can close that poll. So we have a lot of people from the Vancouver area, people from communities across Canada, some in other areas of BC, and 6% coming in from as an international guest. And I know we had some other international guests signed up too, but because of different time zones, maybe listening in later on. So for the second question. So what is your relationship to community engaged research? Now you may wear many hats, as many of us do, but consider if you want to position yourself as an academic, the government, nonprofit, as part of an Indigenous community and nation, or unaffiliated. And again, we'll give about 15 seconds and then we can close the poll. Great, thank you, Laura. So we have a lot of majority of academics here. We have some nonprofits, unaffiliated, government workers. So a good diversity, and that's often the case in participatory research. So great to see that replicated within this space as well. The wonderful colleague Janini has just highlighted too, we have a Padlet, and this is a space where you can share a bit more about yourself as well. There's a question posed on the Padlet to get you a chance to really think more about participatory research with young people. So you can see the link here has just been posted for you. So moving on, we'd like to now welcome our wonderful panelists who are joining us from Quebec. And I've had the great pleasure of knowing Natasha for almost a decade in different children's rights and participatory research spaces, and to meet her wonderful colleague Juan. And they will both be sharing their rich wealth of experience in working in partnership with children and young people in Quebec. So I will allow them to introduce themselves more. We're also posting their bios in the chat so you can learn a little bit more about their work experience. So without further ado, Natasha and Juan, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
So we start? So yeah, Laura, Brenda, and Stuart, and the whole team, thank you so much for the invitation to open this conversation and dialogue around collaborative research with youth. When Laura, you contacted us a few months ago and said, well, would you like to participate in this webinar? And I was thinking about, oh yes, I would really like to. And with a colleague that I've collaborated with for the last 10 years, I thought it would be a great opportunity to reflect back and to share some of our learnings and also exchange with other people in the area. So I'm currently at Concordia University, a professor in applied human sciences and co-chair of the Quebec Youth Research Network.
Hi, thank you. We are really grateful with you all for having us and for giving us this opportunity, as Natasha just said, to reflect on this kind of projects. And you know, we're always very busy trying to organize all kind of activities, and we don't really have the time to stop for a moment and really try to give more space and time to the thoughts and to the reflection on what we are doing, what's the importance of it, what's the use of it, and how important it is for our communities, for ourselves in the different realms where we work. So I am a urban planner here in Quebec and professor at the School of Urban Planning and Landscape Architecture at the University of Montreal. And I don't know, Natasha, we should start with the surprise we have, because you're the attending this first edition, we wanted to share with you a premiere, a very new item in the new Zoom version that we are using today. So go ahead, Natasha.
So imagine that the new Zoom edition has a time machine function that allows you to send a text to the past. What advice would you give yourself in one sentence? 15 months, if you were able to go back into the past, pre-COVID, so 15 months ago. So take a couple of minutes and write it. If you don't mind sharing it in the chat, that would be great. So we could all participate.
It's a special chat function that allows you to send a message to the past. So your pre-COVID self is going to receive it 15 months ago. What would you give as a message?
So just give it a couple of 30 seconds more. It's fun to read all of these. So we can continue reading them, but we're not going to do a debrief around this, but we're just going to use this as an example and to illustrate the importance of getting to know each other in collaborative research, in creating these spaces, these type of conversations to get to know different sides of ourselves. And I think that's a really, really important aspect of doing collaborative research with young people, and that they get to know us and we get to know them. And sometimes it's really good if you can think about these activities that are also connected to your research. So we're going to talk to you today about some of the research that we've been doing with our co-researchers around issues that are concerns for them in the context of COVID. And we've always started with kind of an icebreaker that's fun, engaging, where we all participate. And it kind of creates a space that's more where we're all equal. And I'm sure Laura can relate very much to this, and she's got a ton of activities that are fun and playful, and the importance of making research with young people playful to make those relationships. So as we're moving along, like today, we're going to talk a little bit about how we started to work together, and also give you some concrete examples of projects that we have undertaken and some reflections that we have raised. We have another question for you to think about now or throughout the presentation. What are the questions that you have in terms of engaging in collaborative research with youth? Like, what would you need to go further? A lot of you are apparently academics. Some of you are from the NGO sector. So you're all coming with different levels of experience, but it would be really great for us to hear a little bit from you on what are the queries or the obstacles that you feel in relationship to collaborative research. So think about that. But as we go forward, we wanted to start a little bit about the origins of our collaboration, which are really very connected to the topic today. Are you going ahead?
Yeah, so we are connected through this book, Natasha and me. This is Growing Up in an Urbanizing World. Perhaps you know it. It's a seminal book edited by Louis Schaula. And well, the other volume on the same collection is Creating Better Cities with Children and Youth by David Driscoll. And well, we wanted to show them to you because actually we started collaborations within the framework of the Growing Up in Cities project. This is a project started during the 70s by Kevin Lynch, an American urban planner. And through this research, from the point of view of urban planning, he tried to understand what were the thoughts and also the daily activities and the ideas and the aspirations children and youth have concerning their living environment, and more precisely in urban settings. So this project gave place to a book, Growing Up in Cities, published in '77. And Louis Schaula and David Driscoll gathered a team of researchers through different parts of the globe, and they conducted again this kind of research with children and youth, participatory research, actually adding participatory action research, engaging children and youth in this research and trying to change the way the city officials and the authorities who shape the cities actually understood and acknowledged and took seriously the ideas, the thoughts, and the aspirations of children and youth. So I was doing my PhD at the beginning of the 2000s, and Natasha was doing the same thing at the other side of Canada. And this project was the link, because we were adopting the same methodology, the same philosophical approach, we would say, the same epistemologic approach. In other words, we were sharing the same vision of what research could be and how children and youth can not only be the subjects of research, but actually partners in this adventure, in these activities for producing knowledge for the community. I don't know if that...
Yeah, maybe I'll just add, because we thought we wouldn't use a PowerPoint, but just illustrate some of the, through the objects. So I actually retrieved this video cover, which is Growing Up in Cities, Canada. So I actually didn't do my PhD on growing up in cities, but I worked with the International Institute for Children's Rights and Development. And in the mid-2000s, we coordinated an initiative called Growing Up in Cities Canada. And it's at that time that I met Juan and we exchanged and shared. And we created even a creative tool for civic engagement of young people in 2005. So fast forward in 2010, when I moved to Montreal, we started collaborating in a whole range of initiatives involving municipalities, community organizations, and schools. And today, we wanted to talk to you specifically about an initiative and a partnership that started in 2017 with work carried out with the Foundation of Montreal. And so, Juan, do you want to give a little bit of context? So, yeah, living in Montreal in the 21st century. Shall I start?
Yeah, we are very lucky because here in Quebec, we have the Child Friendly Cities Initiative put forward by a group whose name has just changed. Their name is Espace Muni today. And Espace Muni allowed us to start this collaboration with different municipalities around the province. And in 2017, one metropolitan organization, La Fondation du Grand Montréal, the Greater Montreal Foundation, was preparing to produce a diagnostic of the city, of the metropolitan region, with a lot of data. And the theme that was chosen for that edition in particular was children and youth. So Natasha and I, we were invited to take part on the committee of this project. And well, the first question we were asking ourselves was, well, why don't we invite children and youth to take part of this project of trying to understand, to produce the diagnostic of the greater metropolitan area of Montreal. And so that's how it started all, with a very open attitude from the foundation, with their support, with their interest, and with a lot of stakeholders that were really interested in a very, very short amount of time. I don't know, Natasha, perhaps this is the record of the shortest time we had to prepare something, but I remember it was like in 2 months we were ready to start getting in contact with children and youth, having passed through the ethics committee in our universities and all the long story. And well, that's what this is the report that takes some of the results of this project.
And now we'll actually show you a video. So this will kind of give you a feel of some of the young people who participated and some of the projects that they undertook. Please note that it is in French. So we'll give you a rapid translation after, but maybe it'll just at least give you a feel. And some pieces are in English. It'll give you a feel of young people's diverse interests. So we will run the video now, if that's okay.
Immigrant au Canada, ça fait 1 an et demi que je suis ici. Puis je vais en train de faire une vidéo pour parler de la vie sociale des immigrants, des nouveaux immigrants ici au Canada.
We made a song about mental illness because that's really a subject that kind of spoke to us in the community. So here it is. Feeling down, being lost amongst the crowd, hearing tears and cries, getting sick of all the lies.
On demandait aux filles de répondre à la question comment est-ce qu'elles se voyaient et puis pourquoi, puis comment est-ce qu'elles voudraient être et pourquoi. Puis avec les résultats, dans le fond, on peut voir le pourcentage de filles qui étaient bien dans leur corps puis celles qui ne l'étaient pas. Ça devrait pas être autant de personnes qui se sentent aussi mal dans leur corps puis autant de personnes qui veulent changer à ce point-là.
Quel type d'intimidation est le plus fréquent selon toi?
Je dirais plus verbal, parce que les gens, ils savent que ça fait plus mal que physiquement.
Je suis stressée à plusieurs endroits, mais particulièrement à l'école, parce que c'est là où j'ai le plus de pression.
Mais ici, c'est plus... moi, j'ai une mentalité, si t'as pas la même mentalité que moi, genre, je vais te juger, puis il y a une séparation pour faire les groupes d'amis. Okay.
So just to give a little bit of context to that video, and the last clip part is because I always feel very touched when I see it. So we wanted to go further than consultations. As Juan was saying, we wanted to involve young people's views in creating, it was the Vital Signs, the 2017 Vital Signs report, but not just ask them what they thought for their city, but actually engage them more meaningfully. And that's why we involved them in a rapid action research project in a way. So we said, well, you know, what are the issues of concern to you? What is the research question that you would like to undertake, and do your research and come back with a product, some way of sharing the insights. And we were blown away by what came out of this process, which was basically 3 meetings. With the support, of course, of the organizations that these young people were connected with. So you could see how insightful some of these videos and research undertaken by the young people, particularly the issue of mental health, when we were sitting on the advisory committee with the adults, mental health wasn't an issue that came up, but just through seeing the clips, you can see how mental health is a really, really important issue. Body image was a concern for some of the young women. So I think this is really a really quick example of how important it is to create spaces to engage young people in collaborative research processes. And fast forward, I'm going to pass it on to Juan, who will talk a little bit about what this has led to, following up on this rapid action research process and our need of engaging in a longitudinal study with children in Montreal, and as part of it, that having a group of co-researchers. So Juan, if you want to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, very shortly, because we want to have a few minutes at least for continuing the reflection more on the taking out from all these experiences. But yes, something that we learned from this project is how important it's to base our interaction with children and youth on a project that actually comes from them. And our role becomes more that of an adult that is supporting the youth in building their own idea of what could be relevant and interesting. And we were also very shocked during this research project by the importance of change, how fast and radical are changes in the life of these adolescents, of this youth, and how the city also is changing. So having that in mind, we proposed to the Fondation de Greater Montreal to keep going on this research and to continue on a second stage. In this second stage, we were lucky enough to get in touch with 120 young participants, aged between 9 and 10. We have the support of 2 great PhD students from our university who are actually on the room, Priscilla Dutra Diaz Viola, and your student from Concordia, Geneviève Grégoire Labrec. And the idea was not only to get in touch with all these children and youth, but also to keep in contact with them, keep in touch with them during 5 years, and then to go again and retrospectively try to find with them how things changed during the previous 5 years, during their first years and on the secondary school, for instance. So this is an image of one of our last meetings with one small group of those participants who actually are also conducting research projects and trying to actually by themselves trying to produce knowledge. In their case, they decided to explore how COVID was affecting their daily life during the school, but also on activities after schools, on their neighborhood, on their communities. And well, perhaps this is a good point for trying at least to touch very briefly the importance of this approach in terms of the quality of the knowledge we think we can produce, and also of the importance of the engagement, the ethics of this kind of research and the relationship it engages with the children and youth. In terms of the quality of the knowledge, what we realize is that when we share the power this way, when actually we do not ask the question, but when we build a space for children and youth, for the participants to phrase the question by themselves, well, we discover how far we were actually from the knowledge that could be more relevant for informing our authorities on the city, for instance, and on our communities, the adults in general. the title of this chat, of this discussion, comes actually from one of these questions that a group of the young researchers asked. They were wondering how could they help the adults in their community. Tell us, what can we do? And for us, that was again an example of how rich, how meaningful could be the questions that the children and youth can raise by themselves, and how important it is to take them seriously, to support them in getting answers to their questions, but also to enjoying of this process, this research process conducted by themselves, enjoying of it as a precious moment, priceless moment of contact with them, of discussion with them, and letting us to explore not only some answers to the questions that we had before, but also actually the more interesting and important questions that we could raise with them. And actually, from our point of view, that's the role of research, or that's the point of doing this kind of qualitative research, engaged and based on action, on activities that are shared among all the participants. But there is also an ethical engagement, a position. And I don't know, Natasha, do you want to talk on it?
Yeah, maybe I'd just add, I think the title, it was really interesting because Stuart actually said, you need a more jazzier title. And we're like, well, yeah, we'll use the words from the young people. And I think it really does speak to the need to reverse roles, because usually we as researchers are saying, we want to hear from, tell us your stories and we'll extract that, we'll make sense of it. But in this case, the young people are saying, tell us what we can do. So it's really, I think, confronting us to look at the relationship of youth and adult in research in a different way. I think that does raise some ethical questions, and maybe a couple of things I would add to what Juan says. To what extent are adults involved? How much are we taking on the same roles? And I think one piece that I find really, really useful in our own work has been sort of drawing on the Vygotskian concept of scaffolding. How much support do you provide, and making it accessible or providing the entry points for young people to engage in research. I think in our recent research with this youth advisory co-researchers that we're calling them, we weren't just going to say, you want to be co-researchers. I mean, they've never even heard of research in the sense that we're understanding research. I mean, graduate students haven't heard about being co-researchers. So how do we make them understand that research is something that they do in their daily lives, that is accessible to them, how creative research can be, because there's always a vision that research is just about numbers, about statistics, but no, research can be about doing those video clips, yes, it could be about doing surveys, but there's a whole range of ways of doing research. So that's what we did in the first and the second meeting. We said, well, we showed them some results from our initial research, and we asked them to engage in a discussion and showed them, like, wow, you can analyze data, and show them how each of the stages of research they had the competencies to engage in. And then what were the possibilities for undertaking research, and what were the steps to undertake research, and just asking them very simple questions. What are the questions? What is of concern to you today? What is the questions that you would like to ask your peers, and how are you going to go about it? How are you going to collect data? I think in that process, sometimes working with children, there's always the issues of the gatekeepers, which could include parents. It can also include the institutions within which they work with. I mean, I'm sure many of you have experience, but that's what we have encountered, is that sometimes young people they want to participate, but their parents have more restrictions. So how do you work and navigate around that in the Quebec context for even despite this being mostly minimal risk research? Parents need to give consent to children up to 18 years old. So that's sort of the structure that we work with. Sometimes we worked within schools where basically in 1 year we worked in a classroom, and we only received out of I think 5 consent forms back. And the teacher said, well, basically this year the parents were disengaged. She would never get the forms back. So in the end, basically the data we weren't able to pursue. So I think those are things that are really important. And I think, and this will probably speak a lot to some of the points, and, that Laura and others are thinking about. It's about also making it fun. I mean, we don't want research to appear very school-like, and there's a risk of that. So as a team, Juan, me, Geneviève, and Priscilla, we spend so much time planning these sessions and how to support young people's meaningful engagement. And while it sometimes other research can be very scheduled and planned, in this context, we really have to be flexible. So that's really an important aspect.
Yeah, but perhaps just to close it and to go through the questions now, the question and answer section now, but just to mention something on that, Natasha, we were very lucky of being a team, and perhaps that's a strength that allowed us to face the changes, the obstacles, and to be more flexible and adaptable. Because and that's something very pleasant from our research, our meetings with Geneviève, Priscilla, Natasha, and myself, when we are facing a new obstacle and trying together to find a creative way to answer to that and actually to take advantage of that. And I think these kind of projects are actually richer thanks to those obstacles that forced us to find new ways for reaching our goals, and our goals being, first of all, we have to say it, having fun, because that's actually the engine, the thing that makes us really want to take this kind of projects, and that's what makes us also invite people and children and youth in particular to be part of it, because we demystify it, and because not only we demystify it, but we also take it seriously. And I think that's also an important piece of it, how the data that we collect with children and youth, the information that they gather, well, is as important as meaningful as the data that you can have from a database, from an official source. And this actually puts you in a position where you have to, I feel it this way, you have to be very serious in analyzing this data and trying to give interpretation to it, in challenging the way we interpret this information, and trying to make the most of this collective effort, which is producing knowledge by exploring what happens in our own communities. So I
might just add, and I think, Laura, you might have some questions for us.
You have to stop us, Laura.
Yeah. I just want to say a couple of points. I think engaging collaborative research, it's really messy. And I think that makes it really exciting, but I think that's something that you need to be able to work with. I think some of the difficult questions that we sometimes are confronted with in engaging collaborative research is, where does your relationship and your responsibility end? Because you open up all these doors, like through the video, you could see, they're engaging in challenging, sensitive topics like suicide, mental health. So what are you going to do with these findings? Like beyond sharing, and I think one thing that we've been really good at or intentional is sharing through multiple medium, not just through academic articles and chapters, but creating videos, inviting, doing forums and so forth. But I think that's a piece that you really need to be careful. And one tip, somebody's asking about a tip, I think it's really important to work with young people through community organizations and their allies, because it's hard for a researcher, particularly if you're in an academic institution, to sustain those relationships in the long term. But if you work with young people through organizations, they can also play a role. So that's a piece that I think is really important. I think related to that, I would also say that I think researchers who engage in collaborative research with young people need to also take on the role a bit of advocates, I think. I mean, I think that's a lot what we've been doing in Montreal through the spaces that we're engaged in bringing forth the need to give spaces for young people to have a voice, to influence decision making, you know, in my case, in terms of community programming and community development, and in Juan's case, in terms of urban planning. Because while collaborative research is much more, I mean, in fashion, I think, amongst academia, in practice, young people's voices are not integrated or considered, you know, very minimally.
Great. Thank you, Natasha and Juan, for your presentation and just your passion that you have for working in partnership with children and young people. You've touched on a lot of really key areas. Some have already emerged in the questions, but really looking at those relationships and how they're formed with children and young people. And, you know, a piece that really stood out is around building that space for children and youth and the role of the adult as a support for young people to really build and generate their own ideas, and just the very messy nature. So intriguing how you spoke about your relationship as a team alongside the relationship with the young people, and what does that look like? Particularly, I appreciate the aspect of fun. Currently just finishing up an article with a couple colleagues exploring the role of emotions and fun in participatory research and how critically important that is. So it's a neat piece to see. I have a handful of questions, but there's a lot of questions in the chat, and some you somewhat addressed, but I'll speak to a couple of them. One aspect was really around how shifting power in the context of youth adult research, but how you ensure that this shift continues afterwards. And I think that also relates to some of the other relationships that young people have outside the scope of the research project. So what does that look like going forward in other aspects of their lives?
Go, come on.
We were talking on that last week when we were preparing for this presentation, because we and what we were saying is that we realize how difficult it is really to share the power, and it's false to think that all the power goes from one side to the other, and actually what we are experiencing, or you will tell your own version of it, Natasha, but what from my point of view happens in these kind of activities is not that we diminish power on one side to give it to the other, but it's that we are finding powers in plural, diverse powers that we have on our own sides. And in this kind of activities, what I think is that children learn or discover how powerful they are by developing projects. And I don't know, there are some so different, composing a song, doing a survey, or taking pictures, preparing a photograph exhibition, and so on. So these are challenges that arrive in the life of these young participants, and they find new powers in doing them. And our power as adults in this kind of activities is that we have the capacity of building this space that is not really present very often in their daily lives. So our power and their power, their own power, meet in a situation where actually both we have fun, and both we produce things that help us to feel ourselves more emancipated, more I don't know how.
Yeah, emancipated.
More emancipated, more. I mean, you feel that you can play a meaningful role in your community, advocating for children and youth and their own right to be in the public space, or occupying this public space and showing their friends and parents and family and everybody that they are able to do amazing things. So this is the reciprocal power construction that I think we produce, and these are skills and sensibilities and activities that continue after the end of the regular meetings that we have as a group. And it's funny to meet one adolescent in the metro or in the bus when after a few years of doing an activity and who recognize you and who comes back to you and says, "Hey, do you remember you were on the group?" And well, they have this perception about the group as their own. It was their group, and I participated in their group. So it's also from the different readings that we have of these events that there is a diversity of perception and of narratives of this. So we participate in creating an event, and this event is very rich in the opportunity it brings for every one of us, the participants, to take advantage of it and to do something that is meaningful for ourselves and for our community. But Natasha, perhaps you see it differently.
I might just add very quickly, I think that totally around the powers and really not just seeing it as youth, adult. I think what is interesting when you engage young people in the research is that their research is very collective. I mean, they're working with their peers. So that empowers them and the peers that they engage with. So power it takes on the power sharing takes on many different aspects. And I think that's where the power shift happens. Yeah. But as Juan says, we can be challenged to think about how we can further support that shift in power. And I think that's where, as researchers, we can become more advocates. I mean, it adds on a layer as a researcher that we may not traditionally think of being the responsibility of researcher. But I think that's what makes it really exciting as we move forward in this more collaborative approach to research and community engaged research.
Thanks both, and really important reflections just around the complexity of power and what that even means in different spaces and time. A couple questions we have are around methods. So some people are keen to know a bit more about some of the tools that you used, different approaches to make things engaging. And also, how do you see creating relationships with youth as different, more challenging, or strengths when a research project has become virtual?
Maybe I'll start with that. Well, I'm actually really surprised at us being of what we've been able to achieve virtually. The projects and the attendance and participation of the young people has been really fantastic. I think one of the limitations of the online is, are we able to reach all young people or a diversity of young people. So that's one of our little frustrations in that as you saw in the phase one, there was a huge diversity that represents. I mean, Montreal is very diverse. In the context of online, the support of parents, and if you're working with 9 to 12-year-olds, I mean, you generally need a parent to be reminding their kid that, they have a meeting from such and such time. And so I think the reality is that it's more difficult to access young people who may not have that family support system. But I think in terms of actually carrying out the meetings, and I mean, others on this call, Priscilla and Geneviève and Juan, we can be very creative, and young people are going to school online. So they're becoming super savvy. I mean, we learn things through them. So there are ways of being engaging and using the chat, using the annotation, but also letting young people between these calls and the online medium to engage with their peers on their research projects. So I think that the fact that it's something concrete that they engage in their own space is what also makes it meaningful for them and makes them realize, what does it mean to be a co-researcher? I mean, you'll have to speak to us, in a year or two. I'm sure we'll have another story and it'll be really interesting. But I do think that those of you who want to engage in research online, there are possibilities, and young people are open to that, given certain restrictions.
Yeah, and let me just add that in terms of our strategy or ideas of engaging activities, our approach is quite simple. We propose to the children and youth participants to do a project together. What project? Well, it depends on them. What lights you on? What do you like to do? What's your passion? What's your well, of course, it's not always easy to identify the channel, the medium, the activity, and then we go from our library of examples of projects that children and youth have done in our projects on the past. And well, you can see the eyes of children and youth that start to seeing possibilities of activities that are interesting, that will allow them to become photographers, or to become reporters, or to become detectives, or to become painters, or whatever. So that's, I think, our strategy, to try to propose it as a project that apparently doesn't have to do directly with research. But then our job is to show how this project and this passionate activity can produce knowledge, and how that is actually the very base of research activities. And well, that's where the fun starts.
I think also, I mean, one thing that we do offer, and I'm sure that's not why they come continuously, but I do think it has to do with respecting children's participation, is giving them a gift certificate. And I think that's something that, as people involved in research with young people are advocating, we receive salaries, young people are spending their time, they're engaged, and they should also be honored for their participation. So we're fortunate to be able to do that through the funding that we have for this initiative. But that's also something that we're sending a message through by giving the gift certificates for their participation and involvement. So I think that's another piece that I would highly recommend people to consider if they can.
Great, thank you. And to either of you, and just, we have about sort of another minute left, have any, closing thoughts and reflections, recommendations for people, some of the people on the call who may be newer to the process or getting engaged, or any tools that they can look to, maybe like the link to your websites or other spaces, or if they're wanting to learn about different participatory research activities that they could try out?
I could start while Natasha, I think you're copying and pasting the website address. That's great. But something that I would like to leave also in this conversation is, very recently I've been invited by different municipalities to give short talks on the method, on exactly the same questions that you're asking. So how it happens, give us advices, give us some cues, what things work, what things work less well. And I'm very enthusiastic by that interest from the municipalities, because it's shifting from a few years ago when the idea of children youth participation was perceived as actually an extra load on a already very loaded office with so many things to do. So it was always seen as an extra complication for an extra thing to do. And one of the message I try to give beyond the very clever advices that we give to municipalities is that actually it helps to make easier the things that actually they are doing already. They are already engaged in participatory activities that actually don't always have the fruit that we were expecting, and that are less fruitful than we would like to. And the message that I try to pass and that I would like to leave here is that opening the decision-making processes in urban planning more precisely, but in other areas as well, but opening it to the participation of children and youth is actually not that difficult, and it makes easier a lot of things, and it helps to understand how important it is to build bridges between areas that are not really connected. For instance, education, public spaces, housing. In municipalities, those are areas that are treated by different teams. And actually education in the province of Quebec is treated by a very different ministry and structure. But in the life of children, they go out from home, they cross the street, and they go to school. So they are part of the same experience of their community. So it helps to adults, to those officials who are at the head of these different responsibilities, to really remember how important it is to create more coherence between their projects, their decisions, the way they shape their own areas of action and responsibility. And the point of view of children is very useful to see those gaps between the different sectors, and it brings actually a lot of light for more effective action in our collectivities.
And so maybe I would just end by saying, I think that's why some tips, I think interdisciplinary is really great. Like the fact that Juan is coming from urban planner, I'm coming from community development, I think can be really valuable because of the points he said. I would say passionate, yes, does go along. Coming in as a learner and being flexible. I think being innovative and being creative can go a long way. And letting go of your preconceptions, of your structures, working hard, yeah, and being an advocate. Within your own structures, within the structures that you're going to be engaged in with the young people that you're working with.
Great, thank you both so much. That was lovely concluding reflections too. And we're just so pleased to have you join us. It's always nice to chat through these pieces, get you to listen and learn more about the projects that are taking place. And I think there was many more questions, so you may have people looking up your website, following up, learning more about the research itself. But thank you for taking the time, and I'll pass it back to Stuart for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Laura.
I want to thank Natasha and Juan for a fantastic opening to our session. We are, as we got started, our efforts to bring the event together were a little harried at the end. So I just want to say that CERi is the Community Engaged Research Initiative at SFU, and we are a new social infrastructure within the university that aims to support and expand our understanding and our recognition and engagement with community engaged research. Juan and Natasha's work on working with youth as co-researchers really settles into this work in a central way, and that's reflected in the rich set of questions that came up as part of the conversation today. One, and Natasha, as Laura said, we're tremendously grateful for your contribution and want to acknowledge the questions that weren't able to be addressed. And that's really part of these gatherings, that there's always a richness in the conversation that we can't quite get to. We are going to follow up today's event with the Child and Youth Participatory Research Network with another webinar on participatory research methods with young people themselves on June 10th, Thursday, June 10th. There will be social media and other information and announcements about this, and that'll circulate around. So please come and join us if you can. Please check out our website at the CERi website. Many resources, including a community engaged research handbook that might be of interest to a number of you. I, like others, have questions that I wish I could explore, but we'll take offline. As a closing, I want to thank Laura Wright and Brenda Morrison for their commitment, their energy, and their help in pulling together the Child and Youth Participatory Research Network, and indeed this event today. So thank you all. It's been wonderful to be here with you. Gratitude to everybody who was able to join us. If this event is recorded, and so there'll be another opportunity to listen to it if that is of interest to you. Have a great day. Stay safe, everybody, and hope to see you in an in-person event in the not that distant future.